Did Democrats sacrifice America on the altar of trans rights by giving Trump the presidency? For years, the Democratic Party has positioned itself as the champion of progressive social causes. From racial justice to climate change, Democrats have largely leaned into identity politics, crafting policies that prioritize marginalized groups. But has this strategy backfired? Now, in 2025, with Trump back in the White House, the question looms larger than ever. Did Democrats push too far, too fast on issues like transgender rights and, in doing so, alienate mainstream America and hand Trump his victory? One striking example of this backlash occurred in Loudoun County, Virginia, where a school district's transgender bathroom policy led to a scandal that gripped the nation. A biological male student, who identified as female, was accused of assaulting a female student in a school bathroom. When the district attempted to cover up the incident to protect its progressive policies, enraged parents took to school board meetings in droves, demanding accountability. The controversy became a flashpoint in the 2024 election, fueling conservative arguments that leftist policies were endangering children and undermining parental rights. For many voters, this was not just a local issue, it was emblematic of a broader Democratic overreach, and it played directly into Trump's campaign narrative. The rise of identity politics and its backlash. The seeds of this political shift were sown during the Obama years, as the Democratic Party embraced identity politics in a way that reshaped the national conversation. While traditional Democratic values like economic fairness and labor rights remained, a new focus emerged: the championing of LGBTQ rights, especially transgender issues. What began as a movement for tolerance and inclusion quickly escalated into demands for radical policy shifts. From biological males competing in women's sports to mandatory pronoun usage in workplaces and schools. While the left saw this as progress, much of Middle America, those living in suburban and rural communities, felt alienated. What many Democrats failed to grasp is that social revolutions, especially those challenging biological norms, often take decades to be fully accepted. By insisting on immediate and sweeping changes, they sparked a backlash, particularly among moderates and independents who once leaned blue but found themselves drifting toward Trump. One glaring example of this cultural divide erupted in California, where a father was arrested after vocally opposing a school policy that allowed his daughter to transition socially without parental consent. The story, which made national headlines, became a rallying cry for parents' rights groups, fueling nationwide debates about government overreach. As viral clips of outraged parents being silenced in school board meetings flooded social media, Trump's campaign capitalized on the outrage, framing the Democratic stance as an attack on family values. The 2024 election proved that this backlash was more than just an online debate. It was a political earthquake. The Trump effect, a reaction to overreach. Donald Trump has always been a political outsider, but his return to power in 2024 was fueled by a simple dynamic. The more Democrats moved left, the more voters he picked up in the center. This wasn't just about economics or foreign policy. It was about culture. Americans who had once voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012 flipped red. Not because they had suddenly become conservatives, but because they felt abandoned by a party that prioritized cultural transformation over kitchen table issues. Trump, with his blunt rhetoric and unapologetic nationalism, became the voice of those who felt silenced. His opposition to transgender policies, particularly in schools and sports, resonated with parents who worried about fairness for their daughters. His administration's rollback of Biden-era gender policies was framed not as anti-LGBTQ+, but as a return to common sense. In the eyes of many voters, Trump wasn't just defending conservative values, he was defending reality itself. The Democrats' 2024 gamble winning battles, losing the war. Despite clear warning signs, Democrats doubled down on their progressive agenda. The Biden administration aggressively pushed transgender policies, appointing openly trans officials, allowing gender ideology to dictate military policies, and supporting gender-affirming care for minors. While these actions were praised by progressives, they alienated an even larger swath of voters. By 2022, signs of this backlash were undeniable. Virginia's gubernatorial race saw Republican Glenn Youngkin defeat Democrat Terry McAuliffe, largely due to parental concerns over transgender policies in schools. Across the country, a red wave of school board elections saw conservatives oust progressive educators, who had championed radical gender ideology. Yet, rather than recalibrate, Democrats went further left. By refusing to acknowledge growing public discomfort, they set the stage for Trump's triumphant return in 2024. His campaign leaned heavily into cultural issues, using transgender policies as a rallying cry for the silent majority. When the dust settled on election night, it was clear. The left had overplayed its hand, and America responded accordingly. The cost of prioritizing the few over the many. At its core, politics is about balance. Successful parties know how to champion social causes without alienating the broader electorate. The Democrats, in their zeal to be on the right side of history, seem to have forgotten this. While the number of self-identified transgender individuals in the U.S. remains small, approximately 0.6% of the population, the issue has consumed disproportionate political energy. Instead of focusing on inflation, crime, and border security issues that affect the majority of Americans, Democrats fixated on pronoun policies and gender-neutral bathrooms. This miscalculation handed Trump the perfect political weapon. A narrative that Democrats were out of touch with reality. And voters, particularly in swing states, responded accordingly, flipping key battlegrounds red and securing Trump's return to power. Can the left course correct, or is it too late? Now that the dust has settled and Trump is back in the White House, Democrats face a stark choice. They can continue their current trajectory, risking further alienation of moderate voters. Or they can pivot back to the economic and social issues that once defined them. But this is easier said than done. The progressive wing of the party wields significant influence, and any attempt to moderate on transgender issues could spark internal rebellion. Meanwhile, Trump's administration is wasting no time in undoing many of Biden's policies. His rallies continue to be packed with supporters who see his return as a necessary correction to Democratic overreach. If 2024 was a referendum on transgender policies and identity politics, the results were clear. America has spoken, and Democrats must decide whether to listen. Is this a self-inflicted wound? Did Democrats sacrifice America on the altar of trans rights? While some may argue that they were simply championing a marginalized group, the political cost is undeniable. In prioritizing a niche issue over the concerns of everyday Americans, they may have paved the way for Trump's return. Whether this was an act of noble conviction or political miscalculation, one thing is clear. The backlash is real, and it has already redefined American politics for years to come.